Hey everyone, welcome back to AI.Divine Insights. Today, we're going deep, like really deep. Welcome to your deep dive, and this one is all about Exodus chapter 7. It looks like you're really interested in the confrontation between Moses and Aaron and Pharaoh,
Absolutely. Yeah, it's a fascinating section.
especially all that stuff about like power dynamics and miracles and Pharaoh's just like resistance.
It's full of drama, and also deeper meaning.
Yeah, for sure. It's interesting that you've selected this passage, especially given Moses and Aaron's ages 80 and 83. Like, in the ancient world, that's saying something. It's not just that they're old, but that they're starting this monumental task at a time when leadership was often associated with youth and vigor. What are your thoughts on that?
I think it's a great observation. Yeah, their age might have actually lent them a certain gravitas. They're not just, some upstarts challenging the established order. They represent a generation, a history, perhaps even a forgotten covenant with God.
Right, that definitely adds another layer to their demand. Let my people go, that they may serve me in the wilderness. It's not even just a request, it's almost a reminder of a pre-existing obligation.
Right, exactly. And it's a demand that, as you pointed out, is made with the full knowledge that Pharaoh will resist.
Right.
That's an important point, isn't it? God already knows the outcome of this encounter.
So why even bother with the confrontation? Like, if God knows Pharaoh's heart is hardened, is this just a theatrical display of power?
Yeah, that's a question that many scholars have kind of grappled with.
Right.
Some interpretations suggest that it's about demonstrating God's power to both the Israelites and the Egyptians. Others propose it's a necessary step in Pharaoh's own journey, a hardening of his heart that ultimately leads to a greater revelation of God's authority.
Interesting. And that demonstration of power begins with Aaron's rod turning into a serpent. But Pharaoh's magicians are able to replicate it. So how would someone at that time discern true divine power from mere trickery?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think, think about it from the perspective of someone witnessing this. The Nile was the source of life for Egypt. To see it turn to blood, to have their very substance become a source of death and disgust, that would have been profoundly unsettling.
It's almost a direct attack on the Egyptian gods who were believed to control the Nile and other aspects of nature.
Exactly. You've highlighted a key point. The plagues seem to target specific Egyptian deities.
Oh,
Could this be seen as God not just showing power, but dismantling a belief system?
wow.
If you were an Egyptian then, how might each plague shake your understanding of the world?
That's a great point. So it's not just about surpassing the magicians, it's about challenging the entire frameworks of their understanding. And yet even after this, and even after Aaron's serpent devours the magician's snakes, Pharaoh remains unmoved.
Yeah, this is where we see the real struggle, Pharaoh. Even when confronted with what appears to be undeniable proof of God's power, chooses to cling to his own authority. His heart is hardened, whether by his own pride or, as some interpretations suggest, by divine intervention.
It's such a complex situation. On one hand, you have this incredible display of power, and on the other, you had this stubborn resistance to acknowledge it.
Yeah, and it sets the stage for what's to come, the escalating conflict between divine will and human defiance.
It definitely makes you wonder what could possibly break through that kind of resistance. So we're back, and like right in the middle of this epic power struggle, Pharaoh just refuses to acknowledge God, and it sets the stage for these plagues, which, as you said, they weren't just random acts of chaos. They seem to be targeting like the Egyptian way of life.
Yeah, and it's really interesting to think about how the Egyptians would have experienced these events.
Right.
Like we've talked about the Nile turning to blood, a direct challenge to their understanding of the natural world and the gods' control over it.
You mentioned that the plagues seem to follow like an escalating pattern.
Yeah,
Can you talk about that more?
sure. The first few plagues, like the blood and the frogs, could be seen as disruptions of the natural order, things that might be attributed to like unusual weather patterns or other natural phenomena. But as they progress, they become increasingly difficult to explain away.
Like the plague of flies, for example. That must have been just truly unbearable.
Yeah, imagine the palace, a place that represents Pharaoh's power and authority, being overrun by swarms of flies. It's a very visceral image and one that would have directly challenged Pharaoh's control over his own domain.
And then there's the plague of livestock, which hits like the economic heart of Egypt. It's not just an inconvenience, it's a threat to their livelihood.
Exactly. Each plague seems to target a specific aspect of Egyptian life, from their beliefs to their economy to their sense of personal well-being, like with the plague of boils.
And yet, despite all of this, Pharaoh continues to resist. It's almost as if the plagues, rather than softening his heart, are actually reinforcing his defiance.
That's a really good point. This is where the interpretation of Pharaoh's hardening becomes so crucial. Is it God actively hardening his heart, or is it Pharaoh's own stubborn nature, his pride and unwillingness to submit to a higher authority that leads him down this path?
That's a great question, and it's one that has resonated with people for centuries. Does Pharaoh have free will in this situation, or is he simply playing a predetermined role in God's grand plan?
Yeah, it's a really complex theological question and one that doesn't necessarily have a simple answer. But regardless of the interpretation, the narrative makes it clear that Pharaoh's resistance has consequences, both for himself and for his people.
It's so fascinating because these stories aren't just historical accounts. They're wrestling with these big questions about human nature, divine power, and the consequences of our choices.
Absolutely. And it's interesting that even amidst all this chaos and destruction, there's this constant thread of hope, of protection for the Israelites.
Right? They're spared from the plagues, which reinforces their faith in God and highlights his commitment to protecting his chosen people.
It's a powerful contrast, and one that would have surely been noticed by both the Israelites and the Egyptians. While Egypt suffers under the weight of divine judgment, the Israelites are sheltered and preserved.
Which leads to the climax of this story, the parting of the Red Sea. You've marked this as a pivotal moment, and it's definitely one of the most iconic events in the Bible.
It's more than just spectacle, though. The parting offers insight into how the Israelites might have viewed their God versus Pharaoh's might. It's not just physical escape, but a theological shift.
That's a great point. It's not just about God's power to control nature. It's about his willingness to intervene on behalf of his people, to deliver them from oppression, even when there are these seemingly insurmountable obstacles.
And it totally changes the power dynamic. Pharaoh, who had held the Israelites captive, who had defied God's commands, is now utterly powerless before the forces of nature that God controls.
And the Israelites who had been slaves, who had been subjected to Pharaoh's will, are now walking through the sea on dry ground, literally witnessing a miracle that defies all human understanding.
It's a moment of profound transformation, both physically and spiritually. It's the culmination of everything we've been talking about: the power struggle, the miracles, the stubborn resistance, and ultimately the triumph of faith over adversity.
So what happens next? I mean, surely this has to break Pharaoh, right? Witnessing this incredible display of divine power.
Well, that's where the story takes another surprising turn. Pharaoh, even after seeing the Red Sea part, even after witnessing the destruction of his army.
He still doesn't fully grasp the power of the God he's dealing with. He's hardened in ways we can only explore in part 3. I mean, it's just wild to think that even after seeing something like that, the parting of the Red Sea, Pharaoh still just doesn't get it.
It's really something, isn't it? It really says a lot about like the human heart. Even when you see proof, like undeniable proof of power that is just beyond you, he still clings to his old ways.
Like, it's almost like he just can't fit what he's seen into his understanding of the world.
Yeah.
He's just stuck in his ways, his power structures, his worldview.
I think there's a lesson there for all of us. It's easy to get comfortable with how we see things, our own perspective,
Right.
but sometimes we need like those moments that totally shape us up,
Yeah.
that really challenge us and make us think about what we believe.
You pointed out this part where Pharaoh changes his mind and chases after them again.
Yeah.
Why do you think he does that? Is it just pure pride and stubbornness, or is it something else?
Well, it's a really important moment in the story. Some people think it shows Pharaoh's free will, his ability to choose, even though God's intervening.
Right.
Others see it as a part of God's plan, a way to show even more power and glory.
It makes you think about the Israelites, too. I mean, they just saw this amazing miracle. They're finally free from slavery,
Yeah.
and now the same army they escaped is chasing them.
It must have been terrifying, all that fear and uncertainty. They put their faith in God, but now their faith is being tested like never before.
And that test doesn't stop there.
Right.
Right.
Well,
Throughout their journey, they face hunger, thirst, doubt, even fighting amongst themselves. They question Moses.
yeah, and that actually makes their story more relatable to us. They aren't perfect people just blindly obeying God. They're real people dealing with real problems.
Yeah.
Their faith is constantly being refined and made stronger through these really hard times.
So what can we learn from all this? I mean, we're reading this thousands of years later. What does it mean for us?
Well, I think there are a lot of things we can take away. On a personal level, it's about faith, about trusting in something bigger than yourself,
Right.
even when things are really bad.
It's like a reminder that even when we feel stuck, like there's no way out, there's always hope.
Right. There's always a chance to be free.
On a bigger level, like a societal level, it's about fighting against systems that oppress people.
Hmm.
It's about the human need for freedom, for justice.
Yeah, a world where everyone can live with dignity and purpose.
And it's a reminder that fighting for freedom is hard,
Oh, yeah. It's full of setbacks and obstacles.
but it's a fight worth having.
Absolutely. Maybe the most important thing is that this story makes us look at ourselves. Are we like Pharaoh,
Hmm.
holding on to power and control, resisting change? Or are we like the Israelites,
Okay.
willing to take a leap of faith and follow even when we don't know the way?
It's been great diving into Exodus chapter 7 with you. Your expertise has really helped us unpack all of this. Thank you.
It was my pleasure.
And to our listener, thank you for being here. We hope this has given you some things to think about as you continue on your own journey.
Also, please like and subscribe to AI.Divine Insights for daily podcast episodes.
See you next time.